Today we're reviewing House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 5 and there was a lot to process, so let's talk about it. I mentioned in a previous video that we're waiting for the filler episode. So far there's been conflict in every single episode, there's been a lot of tension, there's been the moments where you feel like you can't breathe. However, this was the filler episode. This was the one where not a lot of stuff happened. There was no tension, there was no conflict, there was a lot of building, a lot of laying the foundations for future important storylines. Just as an FYI, there will be spoilers in this video. I will be talking about the episode in detail. And if you want to see the previous reviews of the episodes that I've done, then I will leave those in the description box for your convenience. Let's talk about this episode. Okay, so we start off fresh from the aftermath of the previous episode, which was the Battle of Rook's Rest. That was a very tense episode. I mentioned in my previous review that that was probably one of the best episodes I've seen ever. So now we're winding things down. This episode has a slower pace. We get to see Corlys, I always mispronounce his name. We get to see that guy, and Rhaenyra mourning the loss of Rhaenys. We lost a very valuable team player. She fought for her cause, she died a worthy death. But anyway, this review is not about her, she was last week's news. So we're getting to see the family mourning for the loss of her. It kind of seems like the TV show is straying away from the books a little bit. Because in this episode, they were alluding to Aegon's dragon possibly being dead. In the books, the dragon is not dead. And the dragon does play a very crucial part. I won't say what in case you haven't read the books. Obviously that can't happen if that dragon is not alive. So it'll be interesting to see if that TV show just assigns that plot to a different dragon or they change the events a little bit. It'll be really interesting to see where that goes. So there's a little bit of speculation and some more theories to be had for people who've read the books. Anyway, so they decide to parade Rhaenys' dead dragon down the streets at King's Landing, which was an awful idea. The Greens make bad decision after bad decision. That's quite clear to see throughout the show. Every single episode, I'm left here thinking, why would you do that? All they've done by that parade is showing the small folk and the humans that dragons can be killed, which means they're not as scared of them. Up until that point, people are scared of dragons. But the moment that you see a dragon being killed, it makes dragons not seem as powerful. And this starts to spark some of the conflict in King's Landing. We also build on that storyline a little bit later in the episode where there is a bloke called Hugh Hammer? I forget the guy's name, but he's starting to not be so loyal to the Greens, and Aemond makes some very questionable decisions when he decides to lock everybody in the town. People are going to start fighting back a little bit more. So as I said, the events at the start of this episode are very, very fresh from where the previous episode left off, to the point where they are actually peeling Aegon's armour off of his burnt body. He doesn't play a huge role in this episode because he has been a little bit decapitated. He's probably just going to lay in bed and drink a lot of milk of the poppy. There's quite a powerful scene where Alicent is looking at Aegon lying in the bed being really unwell, and that's kind of mirroring the exact same scene with Viserys. When he was in the final few years of his life, he was very unwell and she was basically his carer. It's basically just showing that Alicent's not had a very good life. She spent the majority of it not being listened to and caring for unwell men. But she also wasn't a very good wife, and she's definitely not a very good mother. So we now lead on to what the episode is titled after. I'm pretty sure the episode is called Regent, which is where somebody needs to now rule in Aegon's stead because he's not able to. And this is where Aemond finally gets what he's been after, really, which is to one-up Aegon and is to take the throne, which is a possible motive for Aemond's actions, as we do know that it was due to Aemond that caused Aegon's irreparable damage. There is a scene of Aemond staring longingly at the Iron Throne. I would love to know what was going through his mind in those scenes. In this episode, we also progress with Daemon's storyline over at Harrenhal, trying to earn as much loyalty as he can. He's not doing too good of a job. It's pretty much a lost cause at this point. He's doing so terribly at trying to build allies. I don't think I've known anybody to do a worse job. I also don't really understand why Daemon has spent this entire season just tripping balls. He has been hallucinating, having crazy visions. His visions in this particular episode were extremely disturbing. Even he was horrified at the visions that he was having. Won't go into too much detail, but they include his mother. That's all I'm gonna say. It's also very interesting now that we are starting to see Daemon's thoughts regarding how he wants to be seen and how actually he's not that loyal to Rhaenyra. For example, he's starting to talk about how he is going to be the one to take the throne and rule over all of Westeros, and Rhaenyra can be the queen to sit next to him if she wants. Forgetting that actually Rhaenyra is the queen, like she's the one in power, not him. He also makes a big song and dance later on about being called king, even though technically his title is king consort. Rhaenyra is a smart cookie, and she does sense that Daemon is going to turn on her and that he's not as loyal at the moment as he should be. So she's trying to act independently. She's trying to just kind of forget about him and trying to build her own allies because she can't really trust him anymore. He's building allies for himself. And it's also a massive contrast here that Jace is the one who is building Rhaenyra's army. The actions that Jace has taken in this episode are going to really benefit Rhaenyra's side. He's done her a really good service. So whilst Daemon's off doing God knows what, Jace is there stepping up and really building these allies and creating this army for her. So he's done a great job this episode. Let's all have a round of applause for Jace. I mentioned in the previous episode as well about how nobody is really listening to Alicent anymore. She's basically a pointless character. Nobody is taking on board a thing that she is saying. And it's the same in this episode because she does volunteer to become the Queen Regent in Aegon's place, and again she's immediately dismissed. That was always going to happen. This whole thing started in the first place because a woman was ruling, so of course the Greens are not going to allow Alicent to take the throne, and that's also why Helena has not been offered the throne as well, even though she is Aegon's wife. It's all to do with being a woman in a man's world. But also the fact that Alicent doesn't provide very good counsel. She's not that great of a ruler. She also starts to suggest to Cole that he has betrayed her because he was the one who anointed Aemond, you know, being Hand of the King. He did have the final say in who was going to rule in Aegon's place for the time being, which Alicent was not too happy about, to say the least. One thing that I loved about this episode is that we also got a doggy cameo. Our favourite character, Cheese's dog. He's such a cute little thing. He was just quite happy, really. He was following the cart that was carrying away the dead rat catchers' bodies, and he seemed pretty chill. He seemed pretty happy, to be honest. And I think that that's what we all wanted. We were all rooting for this character, and it seems like he's got his justice, and now he's off and free to live his life how he wants. Big up the dog. There's a particular scene that I really enjoyed, which involved Baela and Corlys. Again, I cannot pronounce his name. And Baela is basically trying to console him. Obviously, he has just lost his wife, so there's only so much that you can do in that moment. But she does have a really good speech about how Rhaenys died exactly how she would have chosen to, on her terms with her dragon, fighting for her cause. A very honourable death. She also provides reference to her own mother, who died in a very similar way, and stating that it is how she herself would wish to die in those conditions. I just thought it was a really powerful, really strong speech, and I think that that's probably as good as you're going to get to console somebody who's just lost their wife. So this episode ends with the introduction of the Dragon Seedlings storyline. So this is where Rhaenyra's side are going to find people with Targaryen blood to be dragon riders on some of the unclaimed dragons. This is a very crucial storyline. It's going to be very vital. So the fact that we have now built up to this plot means that we're going to get some really juicy episodes coming up. This one in particular, not such a juicy episode, but very important. So like I said, although there wasn't much tension, there were no like gasp moments, it's still a very important episode. because it lays the foundations of all these important plots. This episode I found was very information heavy. Like, it provided a lot of context and it's given me a lot to process and a lot to think about. And I know that there'll be a lot of scenes in this episode that we can refer back to when there is conflict in future episodes. That's pretty much all that I have to say. This was a very slow pace compared to the past 4 episodes before this one. It didn't evoke any strong emotions in me, if that makes sense. But it's provided all the necessary information and context that we need, and I think that the next few episodes are going to be really heavy. So let's get our seatbelts on and strap in for the ride. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to leave me a comment and let me know what your thoughts and opinions were on the episode as well. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up to let me know. And if you want to see more content from me, please subscribe because it's free and it lets you know every time I upload a video. I will see you next time, or rather you'll see me, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.